DPRK leader Kim Jong-un says his country conducted a hydrogen bomb test as a self-defense step against the United States and the threat of nuclear war, and it has a sovereign right to do so without being criticized. The state-run KRT television reported that Kim spoke for the first time about Wednesday's controversial test on a visit to the country's Ministry of People's Armed Forces. The United States has said it has no nuclear weapons stationed in South Korea, but since the test, it has been in discussions with the South about deploying strategic weapons on the Korean Peninsula. These are likely to include nuclear-capable B-52 stealth and B-52 long-range bombers and a nuclear-powered submarine.
The message is certainly very clear. It is a show of force. It is a proof, according to the US Pacific Command, that they are going to stand by their allies in South Korea and in Japan and also protect the US homeland, is what he said today. So you have the US bomber flanked by South Korean fighter jets. It couldn't be a clearer message to Pyongyang that they will stand by one another and they will show military force if needs be, if they feel the need to do that. It is real sense of deterrent they are trying to put across at this point. Now, the B-52s is a very powerful plane. It can carry conventional and also more modern and nuclear weapons. It has a very long flight range as well, and so it is a particular flight to a plane to be choosing by the US military. Now, we do know that they did exactly the same just 2 years ago when tensions were very high on the peninsula just after the third nuclear test. Interestingly, though, that time it took about a month before they deployed these bombers, and at that point they said it's part of the ongoing defensive drills that the US and South Korea are carrying out. This time round, there are no drills. They've done this unilaterally to this show of force, and it only took 4 days, so there's something to be read into that, maybe.
Turning to heightened defense posture resulting from North Korea's fourth nuclear test, the U.S. deployed a B-52 strategic bomber over the Korean peninsula on Sunday to show it is well prepared for any additional provocations from the north. Our Defense Ministry correspondent Kim Hyun-bin is at the Ministry of National Defense in Seoul to give us more details. Hyun-bin, the Strategic Fortress soaring above the skies in Korea, quite a sight.
That's right, Daniel. Well, the B-52 left its home base in Guam on Sunday morning and arrived in Osan Air Base at noon. And both South Korea and U.S. military officials say that the bomber was equipped with nuclear missiles and bunker buster bombs, which are capable of targeting North Korea's underground facilities.
B-52 missions reinforce the U.S. commitment to the security of our allies and partners and demonstrate one of the many alliance capabilities available for the defense of the Republic of Korea.
The bomber was accompanied by 2 South Korean F-15Ks and 2 U.S. F-16s and flew over Osan before returning to Guam. Now, it only takes 4 hours for the bomber to get to the Korean Peninsula from his home base in Guam, and the B-52 is capable of bombing targets that are 3,000 kilometers away. Now, the deployment was arranged as part of the nuclear umbrella the U.S. provides to its Northeast Asian ally. The statement says the deployment is to warn North Korea that South Korea and the U.S. are prepared to retaliate if the North conducts any additional provocations. And the two allies are also said to plan to take further military counteractions down the road in the wake of the North Korean nuclear test. Now, Seoul-based Yonhap News reports that could include an additional deployment of the nuclear-powered USS Ronald Reagan aircraft carrier, which is currently based in Japan, and F-22 Raptor stealth fighter jets.
More big guns to come. Well, Hyun-bin, I also hear that the Korea's defense chief paid a visit to South Korea's missile command yesterday. What can you tell us about that?
Well, the South Korean Defense Minister Han Min-gu visited the missile command on Saturday and called on the troops to retaliate speedily and accurately without hesitation if North Korea tries to provoke once again. Now, Han's visit is part of a series of military counteractions South Korea has taken after the North nuclear test. Now, South Korea resumed its anti-North loudspeakers broadcast along the inter-Korean border on Friday, prompting North Korea to resume its own loudspeaker broadcast later in the day. Now, Han said the missile command gives the South Korean people confidence and strikes fear in South Korea's enemies, adding that it will become a core strike unit of the kill chain system. Now, the missile unit is in charge of countering North Korea's nuclear and missile threats. Back to you.
A Fox News alert: the United States demonstrating support for its allies in Asia amid growing tensions with North Korea. An American B-52 bomber capable of delivering a nuclear missile flying over South Korea as a show of force. The bomber accompanied by U.S. and South Korean fighter jets before returning to its base in Guam after the flyover. Hello, everyone. Welcome to America's News Headquarters. I'm Arthel Neville.
And hello, Arthel. And hello, everyone. I'm Eric Shawn. You know, this demonstration comes just days after North Korea conducted that underground nuclear test. Pyongyang claiming it was a successful test of a hydrogen bomb, but nuclear experts doubt that claim, though they apparently was the fourth nuclear test conducted by Kim Jong-un's regime. Admiral Harry Harris, he's the commander of the United States Pacific Fleet Command, says of the B-52 flyover, quote, "This was a demonstration of the ironclad U.S. commitment to our allies in South Korea, in Japan, and to the defense of the American homeland." What will President Obama say about it, if anything, during his State of the Union speech on Tuesday night? We're joining us, as always, at this time, Ambassador John Bolton, former U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations, senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute, and a Fox News contributor. Ambassador, sending the B-52 in this demonstration, is that a meaningful move and really a strong message to Kim Jong-un, or do you think it's only a symbolic gesture?
Well, I think it's intended to convey a clear political symbol, and in that sense, I'd say it's probably one of the best things the Obama administration has done in 7 years with respect to the North Korean nuclear weapons program. But the fact that it had to be done to reassure South Korea and Japan leads me to wonder if there's not more that, at least in South Korea, they're worried about that we haven't seen come public yet. You know, it's always dangerous when you have such an erratic regime about which we know so little in control, not just of nuclear devices, but chemical and biological weapons as well. So nobody should be under any illusions. The Korean Peninsula is always a potential flashpoint.
Well, what should we do about them? I mean, the Clinton administration, of course, had that famed deal in the 90s for the food and fuel, and the North Koreans promised not to develop nuclear weapons, and that was a total bust.
Yeah. Well, I think it's clear after 3 administrations, Republican and Democratic alike, tried to chit-chat North Korea out of its nuclear weapons program and failed all the time, that's not going to happen. And I think, therefore, you have to look at more extensive measures. I don't think the sanctions have worked. North Korea is the most heavily sanctioned country on earth, and it's got a increasingly long-range ballistic missile capability, and it's exploded 4 nuclear devices. I think we've got to go to China and try to convince them it's in China's national interest to use the enormous economic leverage they have against North Korea and look toward the reunification of the 2 Koreas.
Well, China is pretty angry about this. I mean, so what does the administration at the end of the day do? I mean, you've got this, Afghanistan, Iraq, ISIS, Putin on the move in Ukraine, not to mention radical Islamic terrorism.
Well, you know, China's angry, and then China's angry. They don't like the North Korean nuclear weapons program. They say that it causes tension in Northeast Asia, and that's bad for China's economic development. I take them at their word on that. That's a fairly logical argument. The problem is, for the past 20-plus years, China hasn't done a single thing within its capacity to put pressure on that regime that would really affect change. And there's another dimension to it. And that is the relationship between the nuclear programs in North Korea and Iran. We know that now, going back almost 20 years, Iran and North Korea have cooperated on ballistic missiles. There's every reason to think they're cooperating on the nuclear programs as well. So when you look at the administration's Vienna nuclear deal with Iran, they've made a great show out of the verification processes that will detect Iranian violations, which is an interesting assertion if Iran is conducting much of its nuclear activity under a mountain in North Korea. That's something we need more information on.
Well, there have been reports that Iranian scientists, have been in North Korea, and they are cooperating.
I think there's a lot of circumstantial evidence. I think the most important piece is that reactor in Syria that the Israeli Air Force destroyed in September of 2007, it was being built by North Koreans. Why? Because of Syria and North Korea's long cultural and historical association. I think it was quite possibly financed by Iran. And the fact that it was destroyed in Syria would lead anybody in Tehran to think if we're going to do this sort of thing in the future, we ought to do it far away from prying eyes. And North Korea is about as much of a black hole for Western intelligence as there is anywhere in the world.
And finally, Ambassador, on the other side of all this, Donald Trump in Iowa yesterday was actually kind of praising Kim Jong-un. He did call him a madman. He called him a maniac. He called him a total nut job. but he said he deserves some credit for wiping out his rivals. Here's what Mr. Trump had to say.
And you got to give him credit. How many young guys, he was like 26 or 25 when his father died, take over these tough generals, and all of a sudden, you know, it's pretty amazing when you think of it. How does he do that? Even though it is a culture and it's a cultural thing, he goes in, he takes over, and he's the boss. It's incredible. He wiped out the uncle, he wiped out this one, that one. I mean, this guy doesn't play games, and we can't play games with him.
Yeah, that's kind of a unique look at foreign affairs.
Well, I hope he means credit in the sense of when Hamas takes credit for a terrorist attack in Israel, not that he's lauding it, but that he's acknowledging what a lot of other Western leaders will not, in this country in particular, that Kim Jong-un and that regime are just as ruthless today as they have been for the past several decades, which is one reason why they constitute such a threat.